got the agenda. And is that right, Todd? Did that get sent out?
Yes,
Okay.
Leah sent it out again this morning, so everybody on the committee should have gotten a link to the agenda.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Great. Um, so I know many of you, but probably not all of you. And so I'm happy to just introduce myself and then do an introduction of why we're talking. Um, my name is Lindsay Woolsey, and I have worked in and out of Oregon supporting various initiatives for many years, actually now, probably 10 to 12 years. So originally working on next gen sector partnerships in the state of Oregon, and working at the state level as well to try to align the partnership concept and idea through the board. And then a couple years ago, also worked a little bit on some of the Future Ready work and industry consortium work. I also was part of the team to work on the board's last strategic plan. And so I am joining you today under the guise of strategic plan update for the next round. But what we really want to be able to do, of course, is make sure that your committee and your committee's work aligns with an updated strategic plan for the WTDB. And so that is part of what we want to, or I would say that really is what we want to be discussing today. And so part of my goal today is to hear from each of you um, some broad level thinking and ideas, but then hopefully really winnowing down to where you feel this committee should go, needs to go, and if the 2023 charter for your committee still holds. And it will be helpful, I think, to couch that in the context of four major themes that we are starting to look at, or I'm not going to say starting, continuing, right, to dive into related to the board's overall strategic plan. And so that's going to be systems alignment and coordination, shared metrics and shared impact, advancing equity, and then continuing to position the board as a systems alignment board. So I highlight those just verbally, just so you have them in your head. They're also spelled out in the agenda. One thing, Todd, that might be useful, and because I always have trouble sharing on Teams, it might be helpful to just pull up the 2023 charter, unless you all have that at your fingertips, which you might, because
Leah, do you have
this
that
is your.
that you could pull up for us?
Yes, I
Okay.
do.
Okay, great. So
And oh,
while
by
you're
the way, let
pulling,
me just jump in real quick,
yeah,
Lindsay.
go ahead, Todd.
The agenda, we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit. But I think that's okay because we don't have much time. We've only got about 15 minutes. So if it's okay with you, Charlie and Tom, why don't we just go ahead and on the fly sort of skip and revisit sort of opening remarks, and we can kick the minutes from the previous meeting and approval of those. I don't think there's anything too substantive we need to worry about there. We can kick that to the next meeting if that's okay with you two.
Yeah, not only do I think it's okay, I think actually this conversation is, I think, fairly critical to all of the people that are listening to
Agreed.
this because, yeah. So let's go ahead and keep going.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. Did you find
Great.
it?
I'm sorry. And yes, sorry to just bulldoze in. I realize you probably had some business to take care of.
No, it's all good.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, so while Aaliyah is pulling up the charter, I would love to just hear, thank you. Thank you. That's great. I would love to hear from each of you, and really, please just, speak up. I know there's quite a few of you on the call, but certainly, I think each of you will have an answer to this. But I would like to just hear, what is it that you feel falls under work readiness? Because I do think that there's an opportunity, and it might be quite important when we revisit this charter, and then as we move into the strategic plan, to really make sure that you as a committee are clear on what key initiatives and focus areas fall under work readiness for you. And so maybe before we even look at the charter, I would love to just hear top of mind thoughts based on where your committee has been and where you think the committee should be. What are the key initiatives and focus areas that you feel fit squarely into the concept of work readiness? And Charlie, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off, and then I'd love to hear from others, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, let me kick it off a little bit in regard to that, because I think it actually does interplay, as I've got the charter in front of me and so forth. And so I think one of the difficulties that we've had with this past year in particular is that definition of kind of where do we fit as a committee, where do we fit within the greater workforce system, specifically related to what we set out to do in the charter and so forth. And so what we've learned is our committee is not a fiscal agent. Our committee is not an agency. And while we may come up with great ideas and great thought processes, others have to implement. So the process of implementing and even, quite frankly, developing are, I think, things we've got to work out through this process of strategic planning and try to figure that out. The other one is the collaboration piece, which again, it's difficult. And Lindsay, as you know, in Oregon system, there are so many different players doing so many things, all with great intent, that I think we tend to overlap and sometimes forget where we fit in. And so we've got Future Ready Oregon, we've got Career Connected Learning, we've got Workforce Readiness, we've got CTE, we've got STEM. And so how do we fit within that cluster? To be honest with you, I think this year has amplified for me. I'm not sure.
Great. Great. Yeah. Incredibly important context that you are not the implementers, but you are the strategy, right? I mean, that is the intention of the board. It's in the intention of the committee of a board. And then you can call it challenges with collaboration. You can you can call it the chaos of programs, right? But the reality of many different initiatives and programs and policy streams, Future Ready, CTE, STEM, to name a few, that either align and coordinate or duplicate and clash at their worst, right? So then where do you fit in as a work readiness committee? Yeah, I think that's great context setting. So others, please feel free to raise your hand or just unmute and speak. I'd love to hear your thoughts then on the question of key initiatives and focus areas that would fall directly under your purview or that should fall under your purview. In that context of you are strategy and policy setters, right? And alignment and coordination is always a goal. I'm going to put you on gallery so I can see everybody.
Deb, you're being suspiciously quiet.
I was just going to call on Deb.
That's because I sent Todd a 5-page document of my notes, which he'll probably send to you, Lindsay, and if anybody else wants to see them, look at it. Because I am a big advocate of AI. I came out, from that tech side on the background. So I downloaded our 2024 talent report, which is 178 pages, the current charter, the WTDB strategy. So I didn't do my 5 pages alone. And then I just integrated, it'll be released online today, even though it was an October 2024 report, but developmental math, because we are 49th in the country on math standards, and it affects every single sector: construction, manufacturing, healthcare, all of the tech sectors, and it's even knocking our students out of. We're in a crisis, a healthcare crisis. We're short 27,000 nurses. Well, it has come back to math. If they can't do the math of chemistry, the functions, they end up with a social work degree. So anyway, there's a math integration at the end of that, because I put in where the developmental math and how, if we aren't building that up. But I just think there's such an opportunity for this group. Number one, the name of the Workforce Readiness Advisory Committee is a space where I think if the committee is willing to move into it, that we can start to talk about career readiness that then really encompasses, career connected learning, pathway planning, where we have such a gap in our state compared to other states is we don't have Running Start, where students are identifying a career pathway and, awareness in middle school, a plan in high school, and they're very much working their plan to graduate high school with an associate's degree. So when they come out at age 18, they just have 2 years to get to a bachelor's, or they know apprenticeship programs, certifications. They have a really succinct pathway plan. We don't have the infrastructure set in the state to really help students get there. Their career exploration happens at the most expensive part of the process, which is in college, or post high school, and we're losing them. And everything that the HEC reports of lower post-secondary enrollments, we can pinpoint it to region, to poverty, to race. And so we're seeing where students are literally just disappearing. They're not in the workforce and they're not in post-secondary. So I just think we have an opportunity, and I don't know if it's under career readiness, but it's workforce readiness is in our title, to really sit and talk about what does that entail, and then start to dissect that down. And then again, align it to the talent report, align it to the data reports that are out there, and then align it to the WTDB as well.
Great. That is really helpful. Aaliyah, do you mind scrolling down to the portion of the charter that is purpose? Because there is there we go, purpose and scope. And if you can make that a little bigger, and I'm sure you guys have this in front of you as well, perhaps, but just to have this, because this is the bullet point, right? List of in 2023, what the Workforce Readiness Advisory Committee will do, right? And said they would do. And I want this to just be in front of you, because I feel like, Deborah, you took us as a great place of sort of the question, if we could just do, the 1 or 2 things that are really going to move the needle on work readiness or career readiness, what are they going to be? I appreciate you raising that Oregon does not have a Running Start program. I will fully admit I did not know that, and and I'm a little surprised. I was just working in Louisiana, and they have a Running Start program.
Most states have a Running Start program.
Yes, most states, right. So it's very, I think it's very interesting, and I really appreciate you making the connections then to the major themes in the reports that have been issued recently, right? Because there's the talent report, there's the talent summit priorities, there's the board's 5 joint priorities, there is the continuous improvement committee recommendations, and they all do circle around those 4 major themes that I highlighted. And so, Deb, for you to be connecting that to equity and diversity, for example, as one of the 4 major themes, and how an initiative like Running Start, which potentially fits squarely into career and work readiness, could align with that, that's exactly where we want our conversation to go. So I'd love to hear from others, and as you scan these 2023 bullet points, which ones still resonate, or per Deb's, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I got an alert that I was gone somehow. Okay, great. So, great. So I'd love to hear from others. Which one of these still resonate, or per Deb's lead? What are the initiatives and focus areas that are going to move the needle and fall squarely into your purview? And since I can't see everybody, I'm having trouble doing that. I also would lean on the chairs of the committee to call on folks, or just unmute yourself and speak up.
I might jump in, Lindsay. I see that Howard's here, Howard Burns with Oregon State University. I know he's pretty passionate about topics that sort of come into our lens here on the committee. I don't know, Howard, do you want to jump in and offer up any thoughts you might have? Not put you on the spot, but
no, that's okay. Just in transparency, this is my first meeting here, and I didn't want to come in like, oh, he thinks he has all the answers. But the one thing that I would recommend is I think it's critical to do active listening with the workforce, with students, with partners, and really understand what the need is precisely, and then propose a plan or create the plan of how we can achieve that need. Because we can look at that report, that the reports, and I think there's going to be a lot of things where there are gaps. But I think we need to be able to distill it down into what are some of the common themes, what are the key initiatives or the key skilling gaps that need attention, and then try to move a plan or a proposal forward. That's my thought.
That's great. Thanks, Howard. I would love for others to respond a bit to that as well, just in terms of, as committee members, and for those of you who have been on the committee for longer, what is it that we know about the need? And I think, Deb, again, your comments kind of lead that direction, right? How do we know that this is needed? That a Running Start program, as an example, fills a certain need. And if anybody has comments on the data and the information that we do have around need, or what's not happening, that should, I think that could be helpful.
And I don't mean to take up too much of the talking spoon here, but really quickly, I did meet with Amy Cox, so the data directors of the HEC, of the Department of Economics and Employment. So I met with them on Monday, and they're coming back to thinking about creating this aggregated data tool that we've talked about, that we know the jobs. We know jobs, we know the run rate, we know them basically by county. What we are asking them to then build is, if these are the jobs, then to look at all the credentialing opportunity, or all the credentials that are needed to fill those jobs, and to start to do gap analysis. So one of the top things is, I just want this group to know, is we have the data. The state has the data on jobs. What we need is a rapid identifier tool of supply and demand, of where are we missing CTE healthcare pathways, or advanced manufacturing, or forestry, where we know jobs are in this region, or we could tie those to community college programs of study. So we don't have a data tool that would inform where we should be focusing, helping students see where the jobs and the opportunities are. Again, a 10-year run rate. It's a short game, long game tool, and then really helping institutions of education and apprenticeships know where they need to stand up programs to help students be able and prepared and skilled to step into those jobs.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, I see a number of hands.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think I saw Beth.
Yep. We have Beth Wiggum.
Thank you.
Mellencamp.
Great.
Yeah,
Okay.
great. Yeah, and I'd invite Beth Mellencamp to jump in too. I have some thoughts around just different questions that have been asked, and I hope I've collected my thoughts enough to be able to articulate it. But what I think so I work at Oregon Department of Education. My position supports career and college readiness and comprehensive school counseling programs, and my thoughts was that the career connected learning framework was kind of the work that all of this was nested under, kind of within, under, and it kind of connects across multiple things. So the framework never, we were working towards a really comprehensive framework, but we didn't quite, I think we were building it out, and what all it included was everything from knowledge and skills to experiences students would get. It centers students at, in the middle. There's different career platforms that we use across the state. There's different curriculum programs that we use. We have a shared definition that we came up with at that time a few years back. There's courses now that are Senate Bill 3, new graduation requirements that include some of the different requirements students in high school have to have. We also have additional graduation requirements, the education plan and profile. Deb was just talking about the planning and what goes into kind of, working towards next steps for students and planning that out. Also, networking and regional connections around what work is happening. So we had a few years back multiple different reports that came from statewide needs assessment, everything from when we were Perkins 5 was coming into place, and then we reached out across the state hearing from different partners of like what were those needs, how can we support the state. So that's how kind of all of this came about, was the career connected learning framework, and really looking across nationwide, what are they doing, and then kind of developing something for Oregon while hearing from Oregon what those were. So we developed a platform because we heard they didn't want a handbook that's going to sit on a shelf or on a table. They wanted something that was interactive. So the platform that's been developed, which I think most of you are familiar with, is a way to kind of help kind of make it something living, breathing, this platform for people to be able to access. And then the thought was that the rest of it was going to be built out. And so Dialogues in Action has done multiple reports, just hearing from needs around the state. And then also most recently, we have a report that's to inform strategic planning that's come from Southern Oregon, working with Dialogues in Action. So those are recommendations. And so that is another form of information that's been kind of collected from around the state. So I'll just give it to Beth Mellencamp if she has anything she wanted to add to that, or I think if there's anything else.
That's great.
Thank you for the historical perspective. I appreciate you framing this for us, Beth. I think too, when I was looking at what is listed on this, this is really Oregon employability skills heavy. I know that, and we have achieved that too. We have the curriculum. We have some places implementing it. I think what I see as I look at this is that we need to have that messaging and collaboration with our business and employer communities to see that they really have an important role in this work too, and we need more collaboration. And in order to do that, the system of having navigators that would be around the state and be serving as that systems level conduit between all of the different institutions that are doing work is really important, and we're hoping that is going to continue. We'd love for people who have influence and can influence to be able to share how important that message is for us moving forward. I think what Deb had talked about as far as like identifying where programs of study exist or don't exist, and finding those gaps that could be filled is really an important thing. It's not that hard to do necessarily. The data's there, it's just going through it and everything else. But what I do see is a challenge that we hear over and over and over. Our districts are spread really, really thin. Their budgets aren't so great or anything else, and they need some help in identifying like what they're going to focus on, what they can add. We have created some extra tools to help districts identify strategies that they can implement, starting with kindergartners all the way through 12th grade and then on to the post-secondary, creating that seamless network of experiences. But we really do need districts to realize that something is better than nothing. If you can't do a full CTE program of study, do some really dynamic career-connected learning activities that support students' learning and identifying their long-term goals. And so I guess going back to this, business is really important. Collaboration and working together and identifying all the different gaps in the system are also really important. And thank you, Beth.
So that's helpful. And then I want to hear from Matt, but I just want to recap. Thank you both, Beths and Beth Mullenkamp. One thing I hear there is that might be very important for this committee, right? As advisors, right, and strategy policy guides. If you can't do a full CTE program of study, then what is going to be the highest next best impact, right? And so that might be something to sort of noodle around. And I also wonder if that connects to Deb's suggestion as well of how does this align or start to build a running start effort. So I just want to connect those thoughts. And then, Matt, you have had your hand up as well.
Yes. So my name's Matt Bezek. I'm the executive director for the Oregon Trio Association and kind of like a conduit for like the student facing side of this and a lot of the particularly underrepresented students across the state. And being on this board the past couple of years, I think even just looking at like the makeup of the board members themselves, like there's so many folks that work on the program side. And as everyone has mentioned, like we've built a lot of the stuff that theoretically addresses all of these needs. And I think the programming side and the materials we can offer through the badging, employability skills, all the resources everyone is talking about here is amazing. What I don't see is like any accountability for the workforce or for industry. So we always talk about like the partnership loop, but we all know things take like a really long time to get moving through the legislator or the hacker to build these systems and like implement them in secondary schools and then through the education systems. But then like on like the drop of the hat or like just on a whim, industry can decide to like change their mind or not prioritize this. Like what I would love to see is more of a focus on buy-in from them and like real. Like I think the entire workforce and talent development system through the entire education system and training programs are meant to address industry needs, but then like I just wish there was more accountability that we could put in place for the actual industry or incentives for them to actually prioritize all these great things we're building. Because you can build a ton of amazing badges, have a student go through, get all of them. And if they list them on a resume and the hiring manager goes, what the heck are these? Like this just looks like some certificate for some online course. I don't care. Then like why are we building any of this? So that would be my comment, is really honing in on the industry side and like not just getting buy-in where like I know people come and they talk very highly of these programs of like what are the tangible things we can do to ensure that the systems we're building match to like getting employed and having those skills to thrive in those industries.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. Any comments? I'm curious or reactions to that, because that's a big thing, right? I mean, Matt, what you're describing here is how do we really understand industry's needs, but then the industry voices that we do have, and the WTDB being the place for that industry voice, how do we also ensure that we're not just going to be constantly chasing what we think the need is and what industry says the need is. But that what I'm hearing you say is that there's follow through and accountability to what gets created. Right. Thoughts on that and how how it does directly relate then to work readiness, right? Work and career readiness, if any. Charlie, go ahead.
Well, I think what we've seen in regard to this, the OES system that we've put together is that when we have shown the model that we've created, there is tantamount approval. People are standing up saying, yes, this is great, this is wonderful, we need this. The difficulty is then trying to help understand how people actually engage in that process. And that takes extra effort. It takes connectivity. It takes ongoing support. It takes commitment by the agency. And it takes leaders within industry to stand up and say, this is something that needs to be prioritized and sustained over time. And that's a difficulty that we've continued to have. We have several industry leaders that may really, really get behind something. But again, Oregon is a small business state. And so as a small business state, it's also highly, highly, highly regionalized. And so, and then within the structure of Oregon, outside of the metro area and so forth, there's almost oftentimes a process of trying to push away rather than pull together. And so there's that dynamic that resides out there. So the long and short is, I love Matt's idea, and I think industry does need to be accountable. Part of the difficulty also is the system by which we can actually capture that accountability. To my knowledge, there's almost nothing out there necessarily that we can do that, unless you'd have a program, for instance, like the OES, where things like badges are awarded, and then you could actually connect with those badges to say, yes, people are actually following through in regard to this. Industry would love to see that. However, there's a cost, and therein lies another problem.
So Charlie, there's a cost to capturing that data. There's a cost, just finish that thought for me.
Yeah. There's a cost in capturing the data. In other words, the programs, for instance, that we connected with, let's say the K through 12 education and badging through a company called Badger. The ability to be able to capture badges or an individual to capture the badge is free. That's not a problem. The difficulty is that if we want to actually then see the results of those badges with tracking and so forth, that's how they're making their money. And so that becomes a cost issue on a per student basis, which means then that we've got to seek some kind of funding from the statewide system or regional potentially to be able to have that information captured so that we could actually see how that process is moving forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, so especially covering that initial cost in order to capture this information, in order to improve usage and the follow-through loop, right, of accountability.
Okay.
You have to have that funding sort of upfront to be able to carry that out. Got it. I hope I'm not freezing. I'm sorry if I am. Tom, you have your hand up. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I'll echo pretty much what Charlie said, but I think that the challenge that we have is that basically we are an advisory committee. We have no power to do anything other than to invite everybody to the room, ask them to support, have them be part of the process to create. However, I think we have to understand, I mean, the weakness of this whole thing is the employers actually doing something, as pointed out by Beth. And there's really no way to make them accountable unless the different groups and agencies involved in this conversation in their partnerships with businesses make that a requirement to acknowledge and participate, support, and make OES part of their culture to actually implement in their businesses. If all we're doing is trying to place people in jobs, and I agree with Deb. I mean, we need to have a needs assessment. We need to drive to those particular jobs. But I think we can ask employers that if they truly want to participate in that process, in order to be able to gain access to those people and connections, then there is going to be some sort of a participation on their part in order to be part of this game. So I think that needs to be a little bit of the impetus in order to make this thing happen. Otherwise, employers are busy, they're trying to make money, and they're not going to just volunteer a whole bunch of time to try and create this in their company unless we actually make it part of our communication with them. So anyway, those are my comments.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Okay. So I'm not seeing other hands up, so I'm going to ask a couple questions then. Again, scan that list, right, of purpose and scope from your 2023 charter. I have heard a few sort of big themes so far. Certainly, there is this big theme of how do we really close the accountability loop with employers and industry, particularly. What does that look like with the OES model? And I'm curious, just Tom, based on your last comments, is participation by employers clearly defined already in this? And could this committee, right, as a advising committee, put clarity to that in order to then create some incentives for employers to participate?
Well, Lindsay, just let me add that OES was not a derivative of, I mean, even though it's housed in ODE, it was not created by ODE. This was actually an employer driven resource. And it was defined. I mean, there's some people sitting in here that were on that original committee. And we literally just said, if you want us to continue to play ball in this arena, you're going to need to come up with employability skills. And we worked on that for 2 years to create the product that's out there.
Mm-hmm. And the product, though, and this is just for my clarification, so apologies, but hopefully helpful for other committee members as well. The product is out there, but I'm still hearing that participation by employers, buy-in by employers, and therefore accountability to the product is a challenge.
I would say buy-in's not a big problem. Anybody, as Charlie said, anybody we share this with, but sharing it with a large group of employers, getting them as a group to say, we're going to all do this, as opposed to everybody waiting to be the first one to dip their foot into the water, so to speak. We're finding we need to have demonstration that this is something that employers can and will do, and it's easy for them to do it. And I think, Beth, you might want to talk a little bit about the product because you know a lot about it.
Sure. And I'm really proud about the work that everybody has been doing with it, because I think it is high quality. It is scaffolded for multiple age levels to be able to use the curriculum and help develop the skills that they would be needing. I think the fact that there is a fully online version so that's where we've seen a lot of our businesses really say, oh, I can use this really well, and see how they can use it to improve the the way their employees are functioning at work, as well as for onboarding or for like performance review check-ins, and so here's some subsequent professional development that they could take part in. That's all been really effective. And we have some great like testimonials from businesses sharing what they've been doing to utilize the curriculum. I think what we're needing is more people just to have the opportunity to get the training, see how they can include it in their work at both the K-12 and in the business sector. I see work-based learning as a really good connection point for that too, because if what we've heard in the past is with business will say, well, we're really worried about having these work-based learning students. We don't know if they're ready for it or something. But if they went through and said, well, we will take work-based learning students who have, completed the curriculum in these areas so that we feel that they're ready to be safe on the job, or this is a really, strong communication related position, just making sure that students have the information ahead of time and then that can be supported. To me, it's sort of like the translation software between K-12 and workforce, and it gets everybody speaking the same language, and it's a really approachable curriculum. And I think, something that we just need people to embrace and share the successes, because, success will breed success.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Beth. So again, it's not buy-in, but it is scale. Right. And so the model is strong, the model is good. As you said, Tom, it came out of employers, defining and figuring out and defining what participation looks like, but still scale and then being able to close that accountability loop, which are both tightly connected, obviously, right? It is what's important. So the other themes that I heard on this call, in addition to what I would, just say, taking OES to the next level, right? Of scale, participation, accountability. Again, is Beth W. I think you talking about. Wait, am I right about that? No, it may be Beth. It was you. One of the Beths. Talking about, again, if we can't do a full CTE program, what's next, right? What's the next best thing, and how do we advise? So a little bit of the anything is something, right? So let's make that anything as concrete and high impact as possible. But Deb, you also talking, this is the other theme, about how do we really make sure that we're using the aggregated data tool to understand what credentials, badges, programs are we missing, so that we're looking at a 10-year runway appropriately and effectively. And then I'll go back again, Deb, to your first comment of, does this take shape? And don't let me put words in your mouth, committee, but does this take shape in a running start recommendation? And is that something that fits under the purview of your committee? Those are the four things I'm hearing. So again, OES, scale, participation, accountability, making sure CTE programs are at least being implemented at the next best level. 3, making sure, to Howard's point, that we are really understanding the data and then matching up the credentials, badges, and programs that are out there appropriately. And 4, running start as a concept, and how do we introduce that? I am curious, if you hear those 4 themes, what does that mean for this committee going forward? And do those 4 things feel worthy enough, and do they replace some of the bullets or just get added to some of the bullets in your 2023 charter? And if I'm pushing too fast, too hard, tell me. Charlie, I'm looking to you. No, okay, you're nodding no.
No,
Deb?
no, I don't think you're, I don't think you're,
Okay.
yeah, I don't think you're pushing.
Both of you.
Yeah, no, you're a great synthesizer, Lindsay. Gosh, what a gift you have. Yeah, I'm going to just pull us back to the beginning, and because this group started as an organ employability skills, it's very specific. They delivered a product. It's a beautiful product. Yes, there's some integration issues, but is the Workforce Readiness Advisory Committee going to stay up in this strategy space and kind of looking at it as a whole around career readiness, workforce readiness, and defining what needs to happen in that space? Or do we want to go back to product development and then integration? So I don't know. I'm seeing those as two very different charters. So I'm backing us up just a little bit on that.
No, you are perfectly closing the loop, because we wanted to end this committee meeting actually talking about structure of the committee itself and what is going to be the most effective structure to make what you need, happen. And so I think, Deb, what you're describing is, do we have sort of the umbrella of work readiness? Is OES one sort of sub piece of that? What are the other sub pieces, or is there another structure that is going to be more effective?
Yeah, and where I'm confused, Lindsay and Todd both, is the intersection of the theme of work readiness with the actual Workforce Talent Development Board overall strategy. Because it feels like the WTDB is the gathering point of both industry as well as education, as well as agency and so forth, with the process of review, strategy, driving forward and so forth, and also supposedly with the ear of the governor behind it. So that gives it a certain sense of authority. The WRC has no authority unless it's reporting to the WTDB and the WTDB decides to go. The other side of this is that in Oregon, a lot of the workforce work, project work actually happens at the local level. And quite frankly, I feel as though I'm in conflict right now personally because of that process, because I'm not sure who's helping drive the ship and where we fit in within that conversation. So, Deb, I think you pointed it out perfectly. Are we advisory or are we project-based? And I think that I'd like to hear from the members specifically on that piece. Again, the project-based piece, also, I will add the kernel to you, Lindsay, was one of those that probably was the most engaging for most members because it was something tangible that we were able to touch and feel and show its development. And it gave people a sense, I think, of participation in building something that's going to drive the state forward, rather than saying, oh, by the way, we think it's a great idea. Anybody out there want to pick this up and run with it? Because we can't. So.
I would love to hear other comments as well, per Charlie's question to all of you, because this is a pretty important one, right? Are we advisory or project based? I think no doubt, right? And we would know this from other committees and boards, et cetera, probably that you've all sat on, right? I mean, when you're sitting on a committee, you want to get your hands on something so that you feel like you're making a difference. And so the project based lends itself to that. And also, the WTDB is a strategy and advisory board, right? And so in Charlie, in some ways, and Deb, in some ways, you are calling out a conflict here or just needing to find the fit. Todd, if you have any comments, I'd love to hear them, but I also really would love to hear from other committee members in the minutes that we have on this tension or this opportunity, right? Who knows which way we'll take it.
Yeah, it looks like Deb, you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going back to Tom's earlier comment that we don't have teeth or legs.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And do we have control over that? Because to get to implementation, you have to have teeth, right? So you have to have investments, you have to have, whether it's state, federal, industry investments, to really implement what we're advocating for, or if we're just in that strategy space. So I was just playing off of Tom's comment of going, ouch. I wish we had a little few more resources, but if we don't, we should stay up in that strategic advising.
Yeah, I mean, this is a conundrum, and it has been for many years, as many of you know. And I don't want to dictate what the committee does, but everything you've all said, I think, is spot on. I think my hope and Lindsay's hope in this conversation is to help us help you, but let you decide on which way we go and how we move forward so that we add the most value that we possibly can in a space that's definitely not, perfect in terms of getting things done. It is pretty high level. That said, I think there is an opportunity to have impact across the system, and as Lindsay sort of touched on earlier in her opening remarks, sort of the plan here is at the same time that we're sort of reworking and considering the best way to move forward with this committee as a workforce ready committee, whether that happens to be, at the strategy level, on the policy level, an advisory to the Workforce Talent Development Board and the entire workforce system, or we end up creating some of the talk that's floated around that came from some of you, a subcommittee or two of the Workforce Readiness Committee that might get more into on the ground implementation work. Don't know yet, but simultaneously, Lindsay's helping us create the next iteration of the strategic plan for the system. So it'll be the 25-26 strategic plan. So our thinking there is that this will inform the strategic plan, this work, where we end up. And the strategic plan will also help to inform the work, of this group. There's also another big lift that Lindsay's tackling along with that strategic plan, which I know I've said this numerous times in the past, and it's finally upon us. And that is the development of a WTDB sort of workforce system scorecard, with the intention of being more unified about that scorecard across the system, to include the public workforce system and more, so that we can track progress, track success, areas of challenge, and then areas for opportunities. So, bottom line, like we've talked about before, I think there's a great opportunity here to sort through all this and hopefully end up getting closer to that thing that Deb Mummiel and I talk about often, which is sort of that, proverbial systems alignment end state. I don't know if that's helpful, Lindsay. I know you've heard me talk about this over and over again, but I'm really interested to see where this goes, what you as leaders, from the business community that are in this committee, from others in education and training, both at the state and the local level, would really like to, see from this committee so that we can get focused, get busy, and work towards the goals that we collectively come up with.
That's great. Thanks, Todd. Tom, you have had your hand up, so I'll give you a quick last comment, and then we're going to wrap it up.
I will make a quick last comment. We did build OES. It took money to do that. So there was funding from ODE. There was funding initially from Willamette to ESD. So we have a product, and I think we have to continue to work for ways to have people in this committee be able to work with their partners to get them engaged and come up with their own independent strategies to do that. Beyond that, I would say, I would echo what people said. I think we are an advisory group unless we can find, we come up with an idea and we find funding, then we can be a project-based group. But I think we're without funding, that's what we're advisory.
Okay. This this is very helpful for my purposes. I hope that it was a helpful conversation for all of you as committee members, those of you who have been on the committee for a long time, those of you who might be newer. I will say that, Todd, you are right. Now we're in the sorting, phase, and that's exactly where we should be, because as we go into the bigger strategic plan for the board and the other related work like the scorecard, this is exactly where this committee should be, right? Is sorting through who are we and what do we do best, right? And Tom, I think you put it quite candidly, right? When we have money, we can do products, and we can actually be a project, work on projects, and otherwise we are advisory. But I will say there may be some real opportunities to hybridize a little bit, right? What works best to get things done? What do you know from the OES experience, right? But what has also been missing from your advisory role, right? From being able to advise on strategy and policy and get the governor's ear, isn't that potentially why OES still hasn't gotten to the scale and accountability that you want? And so I do wonder if in our sorting and sort of filtering process, which hopefully you all leave this call sorting and filtering in your heads, maybe there is a sweet spot for this committee that acknowledges the good work you have been able to do from a project perspective and what works and what you do well, and acknowledging the missing parts of strategy, advising, and governor's ear. And if that aligns with our scorecard and our next version of the board's strategic plan, which includes how do we really get the governor's ear and become an advising board with some teeth, maybe there's strong potential there. Beth, did you have another comment? No, okay, sorry, I thought you spoke up. Okay, Charlie, others, final thoughts?
No, I appreciate Lindsay always. I've known you and this process for many years. And so you always, as Deb mentioned, your gift is synthesizing. So I appreciate that. And you're allowing me to actually hear some of the themes and so forth much more clear. So I deeply appreciate that. So, but I do think we have some coordination and alignment issues that have got to be addressed between the WTDB and this board, and quite frankly, the Oregon Workforce Investment System. And so I look forward to our continuing conversations, both at this level as well as the next level up. And so, and Tom, my co-chair, he's always good at being crystal clear. I think you're right. When you got money, you can do things, but we are, by design, not a quote unquote money committee. So we'll have to kind of deal with that. So.
Great. Okay. Anything else? Tom, anything else from you?
No, I'm good. I think I spilled my guts quickly.
Hey, Lindsay,
right.
I sent out that a map. Thank you, Beth Mullenkamp. The WTDB's done a different map than that that you sent, which was Reardon's old map. So I sent the latest and greatest that the WTDB has in terms of both the public workforce system or WorkSource Oregon map, as well as the entire workforce system map. So it's a little bit easier, more easily understood, I think, than the map that you sent me, Beth. But thank you so much for that. And hopefully, although it's complex, as you look at that, it will help you all better understand what we're sort of thinking and talking about when we say the workforce system.
Okay, thank you, Todd. All right, well, we've kept you over.
Well, and because of that, unless there's anything that somebody has that was critical, says, Deb, good luck getting out of the snow into the airport, and everybody take it easy out there. So we'll
Charlie, just
Yeah.
so everybody knows, before we meet again, Lindsay and I will regroup, compare notes, and have a confab, and then figure out next steps in terms of another discussion to keep thinking on this and get to some resolution in terms of moving forward. So.
Great. And Lindsay, for you, if there's any follow-up that I can assist with, just feel free to reach out. So.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Happy winter.
Bye.